Hi, I'm Paula Zahn, and tonight we're on the case in Georgetown, Illinois, a farming town with just one stoplight. It was there, on a desolate stretch of road, that a young girl's disappearance sparked an investigation that would expose one man's violent obsession. How had his darkness gone undetected for so long?
Feet drags.
A quiet and studious girl, Jessica was the second daughter of Terry and Lauren Roach.
She was actually really a homebody. She was not the kid that wanted to go someplace all the time.
Most afternoons after school, you could find Jessica Roach racing down the country roads close to He was no different.
I just got home from working, and she said, I'd like to go for a bike ride, and so she took off.
Jessica's dad barely glanced at his daughter as she left, but he did hear something a little unusual.
I hear a vehicle running on the road, a quarter mile away from us, and kind of shrugged my shoulders and went on in.
At the same time, Jessica's older sister, Mindy, was making a run to the grocery store.
She actually passed her on the road.
The two sisters waved at each other. But 20 minutes later, when Mindy drove back home, she saw her sister's bicycle lying in the road. She wondered why it was there. Had her sister been hurt? Where was Jessica?
She stopped and kind of hollered for her, but she didn't get any response, and it just made her feel uncomfortable.
Mindy sped home to tell her dad what she had seen. Lauren Roach remembered the engine he had heard idling earlier. Now it took on a darker meaning. He was worried, and he called his wife at work.
When he said Jessie, it was just like, I just kind of went cold.
Lauren then called 911, and investigator Gary Miller was dispatched by the Vermilion County Sheriff.
He told me, that they had a missing person report, and he said, there's something really wrong with this. You need to get down here. And
while patrol officers combed the fields for Jessica, investigator Miller tried to find out more about her. Was she the type of girl who might run away?
We talked to people. It seemed less likely that this was a girl who would take off and not let her parents know where she was.
No one had a bad word to say about Jessica nor her family. Even so, Miller grilled her dad hard. He was one of the last people to have seen her.
And it was very tough, but we asked him to take a polygraph test, which he did willingly.
Lauren Roach passed the lie detector test. Those results, combined with the Roach's seemingly happy family life, convinced the investigator that Jessica had been kidnapped, probably by a stranger.
It's a crime with no crime scene, is basically what it was.
Miller knew that solving the case was going to be tough. The drag marks Lauren Roach said he had seen in the road earlier were no longer there. They had been driven over by the patrol cars.
Every time a vehicle drives over this, it's going to change the makeup of this. It's gravel and dirt and solid underneath, so it's just not going to be something where you're going to leave a lot of prints.
By nightfall, word of Jessica's disappearance had spread across the community.
People just started showing up. I mean, front yard, people showing up, wanting to know what was going on.
Volunteers gathered to search for Jessica. Lauren joined them, and they searched through the night. Terry stayed home by the phone, desperately hoping to hear from her precious girl.
She was not the bravest person when it was dark, so for her to be gone at night was nuts.
But after searching all night, there was still no sign of Jessica.
I remember about the third day that they were searching for her and that she hadn't come home. I knew then that she wasn't coming home.
But that knowledge didn't stop her from seeing glimpses of her daughter everywhere.
Every place I would drive, you just look, you think, oh, well, is that her? You look at things along the road. You look in the cornfields. You look, you just look at everything.
Investigator Gary Miller and his team were aggressively chasing down leads.
We're just trying to run down everything. And we have to run down everything because we have nothing. We literally had nothing.
And then, 6 weeks after Jessica's disappearance, a girl's naked body was found in a cornfield. But it wasn't in Illinois. It was across the state line, only 20 miles away in Indiana.
Our nightmares came true. We had always suspected something like that had happened, and I just felt like we were looking at, at what our instincts had told us was, probably had taken place.
But instinct wasn't proof. Jessica had no dental records that could help identify her body. But her mother remembered she had been fingerprinted by a visiting sheriff's deputy in 2nd grade as part of a child safety class. Ironically, that deputy had been Gary Miller.
We took some prints off portions of the fingers that would be identifiable and sent those to the lab.
Within days, the lab had a positive ID. It was Jessica. The pathologist concluded she had been strangled to death. For Gary Miller, it was a sobering turning point in the investigation.
At that point, okay, she was abducted. She was murdered.
But what Gary Miller couldn't know was that Jessica's murder investigation would put him on the trail of a predator, and that Jessica may not have been his only victim. Six weeks after she disappeared, the body of 15-year-old Jessica Roach had been found in an Indiana cornfield 20 miles from her home in Illinois. But her parents refused to give in to their grief. They were determined to find their daughter's killer.
I couldn't change what happened to Jessie. That was just the fact. But whoever did this had to be found and stopped.
Weeks passed and then months. The investigation seemed to be at a standstill.
I knew that we were going to need a break. Going back to that scene or going over things was not going to do us any good.
Before her murder, Jessica's hometown had been the kind of place where people left their doors unlocked. Now, it was a community consumed by fear. Abby Rommel was 13 at the time.
Everybody was scared. If it could happen to her, it can happen to anybody.
Abby and Kaylin Hoskins used to ride the school bus with Jessica. Her death changed their lives.
Your mom's put you on lockdown, like you can't leave the house and unless you're in a group, and everybody just goes into a frenzy a little bit.
What happened to Jessica was still fresh in their minds 8 months later, when they were approached while riding bikes.
If it wouldn't have been for her, then maybe we wouldn't have known what to do. Or we wouldn't have been so observant.
The girls were out by the railroad tracks just before dusk.
I noticed this van, and I just remember the sound of it. Like it was like no muffler, like it was really loud. And he was going really slow past us, and you could see him do one of these numbers, like watching us.
And she said, something's not right.
Abby told her friend not to worry so much, but just a few minutes later, they saw the van again. The driver was leering at them.
So we stop, and he comes past us again, and she's like, maybe he's looking for a house. So we just kind of stopped on the road where we were at.
But then the van pulled up behind some grain bins. Friends could see the driver watching them.
When we saw him sitting there trying to hide his van,
We decided it was time to go.
let's get home.
We didn't want
fast.
to wait any longer.
They raced away, pedaling as fast as they could. The van pulled out behind them. They were being chased. Kaylin worried her friend would have an asthma attack. Then the girls saw their chance to escape.
There was an alley, and there was a truck parked there that was broke down.
Red and white.
And it was parked just perfect to where there was no way he could fit through there.
The girls squeezed down the alley past the truck. The van was blocked and had to stop. But even then, the girls were still terrified the man in the van would find them.
And we were like, can't leave our bikes in the front yard. He's going to know where we live. And so we went and put them in the garage and just stood there and hugged each other and cried.
Abby told her father what had happened, and together they spent an hour and a half driving around town looking for the van. They had just about given up and were headed for home when Abby spotted it. She started crying hysterically. Her dad managed to get its license plate number.
85B3752. Everybody we could tell, we told. That license plate.
But word of the chase didn't reach Detective Gary Miller. He was still grasping for any clue to advance the investigation.
I would go down to the 911 center, and any plates, license plates that had been run, I got copies of them and would go through them just to see if we had any strange cars or strange events.
It was during one of those searches that Miller finally came across the incident reported by Abby Rommel and Kaylin Hoskins. Miller immediately noticed the similarities to Jessica Roach's abduction. The girls were all riding bikes and had brown hair. The investigator was certain he was onto something. The van was registered to a young man from Wabash, Indiana named Larry Hall.
I simply called the Wabash police and said, hey, do you guys know this guy or who he is? And they're like, oh yeah, we know Larry Hall.
The Wabash police told Miller that Larry Hall had been arrested and released twice in the previous 5 months for stalking. He was the son of the town's gravedigger. They also discovered he had an identical twin brother named Gary.
So how shocked were you when you heard that your brother had confessed to stalking these 11 and 12-year-old girls?
I was shocked and I was upset and I was very embarrassed.
What do you see when you look into the eyes of your brother in old pictures?
Somebody filled with trouble and confusion.
Their DNA was identical, but the differences between the twins were striking. Gary was friendly and had an easy smile. Larry had a stutter and kept his head down. Gary says his brother had a destructive streak and was driven by something dark. But they still shared a bond that was undeniable.
I think Larry and Gary had this classic twin relationship where, especially in Larry's eyes, things were not whole for him. Experiences were not fully lived unless Gary was with him.
By the time they were 22, Gary had moved away from home. Larry seemed to retreat into a shell. He lived in his parents' house, took a night job as a janitor, and barely saw anyone around town.
So much of normal interaction was missing in his life. He was stuck during the day with these aged parents. He worked at night in these empty offices.
The Wabash police knew Larry well, but even with his history of stalking, they didn't believe he posed a threat to anyone. But to Miller, he looked like a potential suspect.
There was enough there that we wanted to go over and interview him personally.
There was no hard evidence linking Larry Hall to Jessica Roach's murder. But Miller still wanted to question him directly. So he made the 3-hour drive across the state line to Wabash, Indiana. He had no idea what was waiting for him there. Coming up, Larry Hall's moment of truth.
I laid Jessica Roach's picture in front of him. And he went like this, raised his hands and turned his head.
Homicide investigator Gary Miller was still searching for Jessica Roach's killer. He had just found a report about a man who had stalked 2 girls not far from where Jessica had disappeared. Now Miller wanted to see if those cases were connected. Investigator Miller had driven nearly 3 hours from Illinois, hoping for a one-on-one interrogation at the police station with Larry Hall. He arrived to a room full of people.
It wasn't just him and Larry, but they were surrounded by other detectives.
Those detectives wanted to know if Larry Hall had anything to do with another cold case, the disappearance of a 19-year-old college student named Tricia Reitler.
What did you lose when Tricia disappeared?
I lost a firstborn child and a very close friend.
The missing student was vivacious, beautiful Tricia Reitler. She had vanished from the Indiana Wesleyan campus a few months before Jessica Roach had been killed. Tricia's father, Gary, is still haunted by the last words he heard her say.
I drove her back to college, and it was after spring break. I still remember her leaning up against the door frame and looked at me as I started walking away. She started crying. And she said, "Dad, please don't go."
Just days later, he received a phone call.
It's every parent's worst nightmare to think about harm coming to our children.
Right.
Describe to me the first call you got from law enforcement.
Basically, it was a police officer from Marion in Indiana saying, "This is so-and-so from Marion, Indiana. Do you know where your daughter is?" First thought in my mind is that Tricia was dead.
You jumped to that.
I knew she would not have done this on her own. And from that moment on, you know, we've kind of known in our hearts, you know, that she was no longer alive.
The last place Tricia had been seen was at a supermarket near her residence hall. She had bought a soda and a magazine. Police think she then took a shortcut back to her dorm, across a field.
It's in that area that investigators searching then discovered her clothing, some of her clothing.
Someone had arranged Tricia's blood-stained shoes and jeans in a neat pile. That discovery triggered an intense search.
We brought in dogs, helicopters, planes, different things of that nature, an attempt to locate her.
The desperate search continued for 5 weeks without any luck. Then Marion police got a break. They learned Larry Hall had been caught stalking 2 girls who were playing basketball, not far from Tricia's last known whereabouts.
In his car are found articles about Tricia's disappearance, stationery where he's written her name, and what the police later called an abduction kit.
The kit consisted of knives, rope, a mask, and some tarp.
Clearly, he was following girls and stuff that night. He had material on him to use to abduct or tie up.
Hall was brought in for questioning.
We took him in that night to interview him. In those interviews, then, we started to discover that Larry would say that, you know, he had bad dreams.
During the interrogation, Larry described his dreams in vivid detail. He said in one of them, he killed Tricia Reitler, strangling her near a tree. Just as Gary Miller had done, investigators in the Tricia Reitler case called authorities in Larry's hometown of Wabash, Indiana, to see what they knew about him. This call was made months after the murder of Jessica Roach.
They told him he was a harmless guy. He was stalking girls, but there's never any indication that he was going to do anything physically to them.
In the end, the investigators questioning Larry concluded that they were listening to the fantasies of a disturbed man and not the confession of a killer.
is clearly in his mind. He fantasizes about it, he researches it, he lives it, he does things like that. One thing that I personally struggle with at sometimes is whether he has the heart to do it.
Despite all the evidence that seemed to connect Hall to Tricia Reitler's disappearance, no charges were filed, and Larry Hall was released.
How bitter does that make you?
I just don't understand that. I don't understand how they let him go. Looking back, I think that they would probably change that.
Now, 6 months after his release, those same investigators were there when Gary Miller arrived to question Larry Hall about the murder of Jessica Roach. Larry was Miller's only suspect in the case, and as the interrogation began, he says Larry was wringing his hands nervously and refused to look him in the eye. Miller decided to turn up the heat.
I laid Jessica Roach's picture in front of him. I said, do you ever remember that girl? When I laid her picture in front of him, he went like this, raised his hands and turned his head.
At that moment, investigator Miller thought he had found Jessica's killer. But he still had to prove it. And in the last minutes of their interview, Larry Hall gave Miller the break he was looking for. He said he had been in Georgetown the weekend of Jessica's murder, attending a military reenactment.
After we talked for a while, he said he remembered being in a town. He remembered that the town had a stoplight, and there was a Hardee's by it. Well, that's a description of Georgetown.
Larry Hall had just placed himself near the scene of Jessica Roach's abduction. But Miller needed more. He asked Larry Hall to take a polygraph test.
When we got down there, he said he didn't want to take a polygraph.
Larry refused the test. But then he started to cry and tell a story about another dream. In this one, he abducted a 15-year-old girl.
There was a girl walking a bike. I stopped and talked to her. I had to grab her. I tied her up, but I can't remember with what. I put a belt around her neck, and she stopped breathing. I just do things, and I'm not in control. I have nightmares where I remember these murders.
To investigator Miller, it didn't seem like Larry was describing dreams. He believed he was hearing a confession to the murder of Jessica Roach.
There was no question in my mind he was telling me the truth. I mean, you could see it in him. He wasn't hesitant. He wasn't being fed any information.
Larry agreed to sign an official written statement confirming what he had just said about Jessica's murder. And then Miller arrested him on the spot. He planned to bring him back to Illinois the next day to face charges. But when he arrived in the morning, Hall had reversed himself.
He says, well, you know, I was only telling you about my dreams. I said, everything you told me was a dream? Yeah, I dreamed that I killed her.
Was it a confession or a dream? As Miller drove back to Illinois with Larry in custody, he wondered what it all meant for his case. Coming up, Larry Hall said they were just bad dreams. But what will he say when investigators confront him with real evidence?
It was almost like a to-do list after you had a body in there.
Larry Hall was under arrest for the murder of Jessica Roach. But investigators felt they still needed to find hard evidence to put him behind bars. Jessica Roach had been abducted in Illinois, and her body was found in a cornfield in Indiana. The crossing of state lines made her death a federal case. Lead investigator Gary Miller turned to the FBI for help. Federal agents obtained a warrant for Hall's van and did a far more comprehensive search than the one done earlier. They took the van apart piece by piece and discovered some very suspicious items. Larry Beaumont was in charge of the investigation.
There was a photograph of a young girl that he wrote Jessica.
Was it a reference to Jessica Roach? The prosecutor thought so, especially when road maps were also discovered that seemed to connect Larry to the crime scene.
One of the maps, he had the exact locations where Jessica's body was found and where Jessica was kidnapped, circled.
And the evidence didn't just connect Larry to the Jessica Roach case. Some of the most startling items found were handwritten notes Larry had written describing his actions around the time of college student Tricia Reitler's abduction.
I think the notes are incredibly incriminating. They're consistent with what we know from the last sightings of Tricia. They indicate how he stalked the area over and over again.
One note referred to the exact intersection outside Marsh's supermarket, the last place Tricia had been seen. Seen many nice girls at Marsh's, Larry writes. Seen joggers and bikers, many alone. Then in a note dated a week after Tricia's disappearance, Larry reminds himself to cut out stained carpet, burn paint tarps, buy new hacksaw blades, clean all tools. To investigators, it read like the secret diary of a killer.
It was almost like a to-do list after you had a body in there.
We were pretty confident we would have a pretty decent case.
Authorities believed they had gathered compelling evidence against Larry Hall in both Jessica and Tricia's cases. But as a federal prosecutor, Beaumont didn't have jurisdiction in the Reitler case.
The problem is that the Reitler case was really a local homicide case. Because they didn't find a body, there was no interstate aspects.
Because Jessica was abducted in Illinois and found in Indiana, federal kidnapping laws let Beaumont move against Larry Hall. Beaumont also knew Gary Hall had traveled to war reenactments with his twin brother in Larry's van. Now that the van had been found with incriminating evidence, investigators decided to take a hard look at Gary Hall.
Did you ever help your brother kidnap or harm women?
No, never.
So you never found yourself in a situation where you were traveling with your brother where he got you unwittingly involved?
Not at all.
Beaumont also wondered if the twins' father was trying to protect Larry. He claimed to have a receipt from a mechanic proving that Larry's van was being serviced at the time of Jessica's abduction. The prosecutor went to the mechanic himself to check it out.
When we got there, there was a sign on the door that says, "You can meet me at my attorney's office." And we went to the attorney's office, and basically what happened was the owner of the shop admitted that his dad came in and begged him to create a phony invoice.
Ultimately, no charges were brought against Gary nor his father. But prosecutors now felt they had enough against Larry Hall to get a conviction. On December 21st, 1994, he was charged with kidnapping in federal court. At his trial, the prosecution showed the evidence collected from Hall's van, as well as what they said was a detailed confession of the abduction and murder of Jessica Roach. The defense argued that Larry Hall was a disturbed man who dreamed about killing women and talked about those dreams as a way of gaining attention. The jury sided with the prosecution. After deliberating less than 5 hours, the jurors convicted Hall of kidnapping. The sentence was life without parole in federal prison. Jessica's parents took comfort that Larry Hall would now be off the streets.
I can remember thinking, why did Jessie have to be the last one? She's the one who caught him. And I think that's important to know that he's not going to be out there anymore.
But the prosecutor wasn't satisfied. The Reitlers still didn't know what had happened to their daughter.
I was always very bothered by the fact that the Raitler's daughter just disappeared and vanished.
He was about to put in place a daring plan to corner Larry Hall and get justice for Tricia once and for all. Coming up, can a convicted felon uncover Larry Hall's secrets?
He says, we'd like to know if you would be interested in going undercover in a maximum security prison.
He didn't find the body. He wasn't going to get anything.
Want more on the case? Go to investigationdiscovery.com/PaulaZahn and view more exclusive interviews and behind-the-scenes video. Larry Hall had been sentenced to life in prison for the abduction of Jessica Roach. But investigators thought Hall still had secrets to reveal, and the parents of Tricia Reitler hoped one of them would lead to their little girl.
You know she's out there somewhere. Physically, she's there somewhere.
For more than 15 years, Tricia Reitler's parents have been on a mission to find their daughter's body. Where has your search for answers taken you?
Swamps, lakes.
You mean physically? We've been in people's dining rooms where they've laid a map out on the table saying where she is, and there's X's marked on a map. Yeah. Within seconds of showing up at the site, you realize it's just futile.
The federal prosecutor who convicted Larry Hall for the kidnapping of Jessica Roach wanted to help the Reitler family as well.
They don't have any answers. Yeah, they just don't know what happened.
In the days after the Roach trial, Larry Beaumont organized a search of the massive nature reserve where Larry Hall had told investigators he had buried Tricia's body. While an Army unit combed the woods with cadaver dogs, an FBI plane searched from above.
We actually went out and spent days out there, but we couldn't find any.
Frustrated, the prosecutor came up with a bold plan. Maybe Larry would open up about Tricia's case if he were talking to a person he trusted instead of investigators. Beaumont needed someone to go undercover.
We really didn't know what it was about until we got there.
He contacted Jimmy Keene, a former high school football player and the son of a police officer who was now in serious trouble. He was facing a 10-year sentence on a drug charge. Beaumont offered Keene a deal.
He says, we'd like to know if you would be interested in going undercover in a maximum security prison and try and help us solve this case.
The deal on the table? Get Larry Hall to reveal the location of Tricia Reitler's body. And then Keene would get an early release from prison.
Told him specifically, no body, no credit. If he didn't find the body, he wasn't going to get anything. It would be a waste of time.
Keene took the deal and was transferred to the maximum security psychiatric hospital in Missouri, where Larry Hall was being held. Inside the facility, only the warden and the chief doctor would know Keene was working undercover. On the first day of the operation, Keene bumped into Larry Hall and asked him for directions to the library.
And I said, thanks a lot, I appreciate that from a cool guy like you. And that was my first break with him because his reaction to me was, you think I'm a cool guy?
Did he say that out loud?
Yeah, and he bugged his eyes real big and he says, do you think I'm a cool guy? Like nobody in his life had ever said he was a cool guy.
The two men started spending time together. One day, they were watching TV when an aggressive prisoner tried to change the channel. Keene saw that as an opportunity to impress Larry. He went after the inmate.
I beat him to a pulp in front of Larry and Larry's little friends.
That was a pretty crazy thing to do.
It was a gutsy thing to do, yeah. But this is what I felt was the right thing to do at that moment.
The prison guards, who had no idea Keene was an FBI plant, threw him into solitary confinement overnight.
I seen Larry that morning in the breakfast hall line, and when him and I were sitting down talking, they were You could just tell he felt very close to me now, like I was a protector to him.
Over time, Keene won Larry's trust. The two started spending time in Larry's cell. And in that dimly lighted room, Keene says Larry opened up about killing Jessica Roach.
He took her up to this tree and he strangled her to death.
Larry described the attack in gruesome detail.
You had to be sick inside when you hear him say these things.
Yeah, I mean, and that's where it was very hard for me to pull back, you know, because I just looked at him as like the lowest form of life that there is. And I'm looking at him like I want to rip his head off.
Then, just a few weeks later, Hall told Keene he had also killed Tricia Reitler.
He said he started choking her in a rage of panic because she was fighting so strongly against him.
And then Hall said he blacked out. And when he woke up, Tricia was lying dead beside him.
He decided he was going to get a lantern and he was going to use lime and he was going to take her away out in the woods and he was going to bury her with lime.
Hall had told police similar stories, but Keene needed to get the missing piece of proof. Where had Hall buried Tricia?
I physically feel sick, as you described.
Oh, yes.
What Larry Hall shared with you.
I felt physically sick when I was around him, but I didn't have a lot of alternatives.
Keene knew he was close to winning his freedom, but Hall still hadn't revealed exactly where he had buried Tricia. Then a few days later, Keene says he got his answer when he came across Larry carving tiny falcons in the wood shop.
He had a map laid out in front of him of Illinois, Wisconsin, and Indiana. His first reaction was to dive on the map and fold it up and cover it up really fast.
Then Larry explained that the falcons were totems to watch over the dead.
And I was kind of like, wow, that's pretty wild. And he goes, do you want one? I said, no, Larry, I got a lot of life left in me.
Keene felt certain the location of Tricia Reitler's body would be found on that map. He contacted his FBI handler for the undercover operation with the news, leaving an urgent message. But after he was done, he couldn't resist taunting Larry Hall by revealing his secret mission and its reward.
I said, Larry, I'm going to be going home tomorrow because the FBI told me they have me out within 24 hours. And I says, Larry, I think you're one pathetic piece of, and I went on with a tirade of different terms I called him. And I said, to me, you're the lowest level of life on the planet. And he slid back away from me.
The intense confrontation brought prison guards who knew nothing about the undercover operation. They separated the two men and eventually placed Keene in solitary confinement. It took days for the FBI to get Keene's message about what he had learned. And by the time they got it, the map had disappeared. Keene passed a polygraph test about the map, and authorities were convinced he had told them the truth. Even though the undercover operation failed, Jimmy Keene was eventually released and granted a full pardon.
We still rewarded him for the effort because obviously he spent 7 or 8 months with Larry Hall. I mean, that deserves some credit.
After his identical twin brother was sentenced to life in prison back in 1995, Gary Hall's life seemed to spiral out of control. He lost his job, and his second marriage fell apart.
Do you have any sense of guilt that you weren't able to stop your brother?
Who wouldn't? Who wouldn't?
What do you think of your brother today?
You want the truth, I'm sure.
I want the truth.
It just amazes me that how he got by with it for so long.
In 2009, Gary went with cold case investigators to Larry's prison to urge him to come clean once and for all.
When I met him for the last time, in July of 2009, I cried with him. And I realized that I still love my brother.
In spite of all
the evil he's responsible for.
It's not been easy. It's not been easy, and he sickens me. But at the same time, I hurt because I miss him.
Hi, I'm Paula Zahn, and tonight we're on the case in Los Angeles where a beautiful young woman and her dream of fame and fortune vanished. Her disappearance triggered a nationwide search and left her parents clinging to their own dream to see their precious daughter safe at home again.
I was scared. I knew something was wrong.
When Kirk Johnson got the phone call at his Michigan home, his heart sank. His 21-year-old daughter, Christy, was missing. She had disappeared 2 days before without a trace.
She was everybody's daughter. She was a passion for, what makes life worth living. But she was missing, and so everybody had a feeling for, let's find her.
Christy was new to life in Southern California. She had recently moved to Los Angeles from Holland, Michigan. She was there to finish college, but had also been pursuing a newfound passion, making a name for herself in Hollywood.
Was Christy a little girl who dreamed about becoming a movie star?
I think it was in her, yes. I mean, it's that little girl dream.
But jobs were scarce and money was tight. According to her father, Christy had been struggling to find her way in the big city.
I told her, I said, it's time to come home.
And what did Christy say? How did she react?
I think she felt comfortable with it. She was going to come back. And in fact, it had gone so far that I had already contacted U-Haul, and I was going to fly out to Los Angeles and drive from California and come back to Michigan.
But just days before she was going to head back home, Christy changed her mind. She had landed a production job on a Hollywood movie and decided to stay in California.
She decided she wanted to continue to give it a try, and she didn't want to leave. And I tried to convince her otherwise, but she was sincere in staying.
Now, 3 months after that conversation, Christy was missing. Her father, Kirk, an environmental engineer in Michigan, flew to California. He went straight to the Santa Monica police, desperate for answers.
What kinds of questions did you ask the detective?
Who had any contact with Christy? What did her roommates tell them? Where was her car last seen? Couldn't find her car. Did they have any information on any of her last emails or cell phone contacts?
Nothing he was hearing from Santa Monica detective Virginia Obenchain about Christy's last known whereabouts made him feel any better.
Christy was going to the mall, she was going to go shopping, and that she had a rave party that she was going to Saturday night. And she hadn't shown up. On Monday, she hadn't shown up for work. And she was always on the phone with her mother, never missed a day calling her, never missed work, was always very on time and very responsible.
Kirk then revealed something to detectives he thought they should look into.
I knew she was having problems with a boyfriend, and she had broken up with him. And it was actually one of my first suspicions that he could have been involved.
Christy had had a domestic violence incident with her boyfriend. Christy had called the police.
Police brought Christy's boyfriend in for questioning.
He had said that there was an incident, that it didn't amount to very much, that he was extremely sorry, that was the one and only time that it had happened, that they were on their way back together again, that he loved her very much, that he would never hurt her, and anything that he could do to help, he would.
He also told them he could prove he had nothing to do with Christy's disappearance.
In fact, he had an alibi with multiple people.
With her boyfriend officially cleared, investigators looked for other leads.
We called the credit card companies and we called the cell phone company. We were told that she had purchased several items at the Century City Mall, and we had told that her cell phone had a ping in the Mount Olympus, Hollywood Hills area.
Using those cell phone records, they began to establish a rough timeline of Christie's whereabouts on Saturday, February 15th.
Her roommate said, well, the last I saw of her, she was trying on some clothes for me, and she's all excited because she was going to a photo shoot.
Detectives realized this could be their first big break in the case. They pressed Christie's roommate for more details about the photo shoot.
She repeated what Kristen had told her, that she'd met a man in the Century City Mall, that she was going to have the opportunity to be in a James Bond promotion film, that she might be paid $100,000 for doing it, and that she had an appointment at 5:30 that evening. Unfortunately, the roommate did not remember where that appointment was. She said, oh, I think it's in Beverly Hills or Hollywood or somewhere.
But the roommate was able to tell detectives exactly what Christie was told to wear for the shoot.
White button-down men's style shirt and the short black skirt with the sheer nylons and these stiletto heels.
In Hollywood, the threat that someone might prey on the innocence of a beautiful girl with a dream was all too real. So police decided to make Christie's case public. Maybe someone had seen her, or even had their own encounter with a man promising to make them a star. The chief of police held a news conference asking anyone with information to come forward. Christie's father searched for his daughter day and night.
I went to Christie's apartment, and I put a poster on her wall to the entrance to her apartment with a big picture of Christie. A picture of her car. It was a Miata. Take a look. Just keep your eyes out there.
How crushing was that for you?
I couldn't believe this was happening. It shouldn't happen. What am I doing here?
But then police got a call from a young woman with a bizarre story.
He said, I know this sounds ridiculous, but, I'm a director of photography, and we're casting for the new James Bond movie.
Would it lead investigators to Christie? Christie Johnson's disappearance quickly became national news. Police were getting dozens of tips, and even as the days went by, Christie's family stayed hopeful and prayed for her safe return.
Christie, please come home safe. I can't find peace in my life without you.
12 days after she vanished, Christie's family held two separate vigils to mark her birthday, one in Los Angeles, another in Michigan.
Today is Christie's 22nd birthday. Happy birthday, Christie. We love you.
Meanwhile, the search for Christie intensified.
What do you remember most about the early hours of the search for Christie?
There were people that were going around to empty lots, handing out flyers, nailing them on telephone poles. It was in the news. It was in the newspaper. Everybody looking. Everybody fell in love with Christie. And everybody believed that there would be a happy ending to the story.
Detectives worked the case hard, following up on every lead. They went back to the Century City Mall where Christie had bought the miniskirt and the white shirt. They also visited the shop where she had purchased her new shoes.
We're in West Los Angeles, which is where Christie Johnson purchased the heels and hose for her audition. I was actually able to confirm that she had been here because I had the credit card receipt, and they were able to pull it up and show me exactly what it was she purchased.
We were scouring Century City, going back tracing everything. We went to the mall. We were looking through surveillance videos. Everything that we could possibly do, we were doing.
The hard work paid off. When detectives reviewed the security video from one of the stores, there she was at 1:36 p.m., walking away from a cash register. Investigators added that information to the timeline they were building. Her cell phone records showed that the last calls Christy made were at 5:30 and 5:34 to 411 information. The calls were placed from the Hollywood Hills about 4 hours after she left the mall. The clues all seemed promising, but police were still frustrated.
Everything just turned into dead ends. Nothing turned up any viable evidence.
But all the media attention surrounding Christy's case kept generating new leads. One call came into the tip line from Susan Murphy, a 25-year-old who had read about Christy in a newspaper.
What was it in the article that caught your attention?
Well, first of all, she's beautiful. I saw this beautiful picture, so I wanted to read about this girl missing. And it said that she disappeared after an appointment with a photographer.
For Susan, there was something terrifyingly familiar about that story. Just 3 weeks before, a man had approached her at the same mall where Christy had been shopping just hours before she disappeared.
My heart sank. I thought, could it possibly be the same person?
Susan told police the man she met at the mall called himself Victor Thomas.
He said, I know this sounds ridiculous, but I'm a director of photography, and we're casting for the new James Bond movie. And he said, there's a certain look we're going for, and you'd be great for this. Be perfect. Would you be interested?
Susan was flattered, but she knew the movie business and sensed there was something phony about Victor.
I am a member of the Screen Actors Guild, and the things he was saying, I didn't really jive with the actual industry, but I was still curious enough to go and sit down with him at the mall to hear more about this movie. He said I'd make about $100,000, and day players don't make that kind of money. And then he started naming out a bunch of legitimate directors and photographers and legitimate costume designers.
So it seemed
he did his homework.
Plausible.
It seemed plausible.
Susan said Victor wanted her to audition the next day near Santa Monica Boulevard.
Did he say where it was you were going to meet him? Was it a home? Was it a studio?
He said, just meet me in front of a building. He gave me an address of a building. He said, meet me in front. I remember when I left the table, I said, I'm gonna show up tomorrow. I'm gonna show up, but I'm fully aware that I'll probably be thrown into a van and sold into white slavery or something. Because I said, I don't really trust you, but I'm gonna be there.
You said that to him?
Yes.
And what was his reaction?
He was like, okay, and then he's like, I hope you show up.
Susan went on to describe the outfit Victor wanted her to wear to the audition.
A black miniskirt, a white man's shirt, and my hair in a ponytail slicked back as tight as possible, and a man's tie, but he said he was going to bring the tie, because he already had one in mind that he wanted me to wear.
Police were stunned. The outfit described by Susan was identical to the one Christy had purchased at the mall and later modeled for her roommate. But police didn't let on. They didn't want to influence Susan's story. They asked her to continue. Susan said she was torn. As the level-headed daughter of an FBI agent, she didn't trust Victor. But the idea of being in a James Bond movie was hard to resist. She decided to keep the appointment with Victor.
In spite of this vibe you were getting, you were still intrigued.
Absolutely.
What made you decide to go through with her?
I think that I'm the kind of person who likes to see it as close to the fire as possible without getting burned.
And just in case her suspicions were right, her boyfriend, a former policeman, would come along. Susan didn't see how she could lose. She had a chance to land a dream role in a movie, or exact revenge on a Hollywood hustler.
What were you feeling as you left this encounter?
Excited. Okay, I'm on to something here. Something's going on. I did not know what it was, but I think it was that gut feeling that something can come of this that might be interesting.
Coming up, Susan Murphy's shocking encounter.
He was hiding in the bushes. He was very angry.
Will her story help police find Christy Johnson? Christy Johnson had been missing for more than a week when a young woman contacted police with a story that sounded remarkably similar to what they thought had happened to Christy. But would it help them find her?
Being a Bond girl, I think lots of women dream about that. You know, that's a pretty cool deal.
Susan Murphy told police she was offered the opportunity of a lifetime from a man who called himself Victor Thomas. But her instincts told her something wasn't right.
When I went home that night, I actually called the Screen Actors Guild. I called New York and I called Los Angeles. And I asked them, is there a Bond film in production or going to be? And they said, not that we know of.
Despite the warning signs, she decided to meet Victor anyway.
Next day, I got prepared by wearing cargo pants and a t-shirt and, I brought mace and a camera with me.
Now, is that ordinarily something you would travel with?
No, not necessarily, no.
And as an added precaution, Susan's fiance would go with her. He sat watching from the car as Susan waited for Victor to arrive.
And what happened?
He kind of appeared out of nowhere. I'm not sure where he came from, and he was all dressed in a suit, and he had a day planner with him. And he said, we really got it going here. I didn't realize how late it was.
Susan says Victor grabbed her arm and directed her across the street.
And I said, I'm not going anywhere with you. And I said, I need identification. He said, I don't have any identification. And at that point, when he said no identification, I said, well, maybe this will help you find it.
Susan motioned to her fiancé, Tony, who got out of the car immediately.
When Victor saw Tony, because Tony's a big guy, he's a second-degree black belt, and Victor was like, you know what, you are so not right for this part at all, and I'm done with this.
And with that, Victor disappeared before Tony could reach him. They quickly got back into their car, drove around the block several times, and finally, they spotted him.
When we see him start dusting himself off, he was hiding in the bushes around the corner in a small, alleyway. Then Tony stops the car, he gets out, and he starts frisking him. I could see this guy was, practically in tears, but then the guy broke free, and then he ran through traffic on Santa Monica Boulevard.
And that was the last they saw of Victor.
Did you call the police?
Not at that point. I just, like I said, chalked it up to another weird Hollywood experience.
But now, with Christy Johnson's disappearance making headlines, her experience seemed far more sinister. Susan didn't know if the man who called himself Victor Thomas had anything to do with it, but she decided to call the tip line anyway.
And I thought, oh, great, again, they're going to go, this girl is crazy, but I thought, I'm going to give it a whirl.
She called to say, I don't know if this is anything, but we called her in, and then we asked if she could stay for a few hours and do a composite for us.
From Susan's description, a police artist created a composite sketch. And then Detective Obachane took her back to Century City to review security video from the day she was in the mall and met Victor.
And we brought Susan over to the security office, and as soon as she looked at the monitor and went, that's him.
The investigation was picking up steam. And then another call came in. Christy's car had been found in the valet parking lot of a hotel. Detectives immediately called her parents.
When Christy's car was found in a parking lot, did that offer you any hope at all?
I had no idea. The thoughts went through my mind. They're going to find Christy in the trunk. They're going to find signs of violence. They're going to find blood. They're going to find, I had no idea what they would find.
Christy's cell phone was in the car, but no other physical evidence was recovered.
The valet had told us that he saw a man early one Sunday morning bring the car, park it in an area that was not a parking zone, told the man, well, you have to valet the car. The man threw the keys at him and said, well, valet it then.
The valet's encounter took place the morning after Christy was last seen.
Every bit of evidence that we were being told kept pointing towards something had gone wrong. Something was drastically wrong.
For Kirk Johnson, the news was painful. For police, the new leads were promising. They decided to hold another news conference asking for the public's help.
The Santa Monica Police Department is seeking the assistance of the public to identify and locate the individual depicted in this composite drawing.
The composite sketch was broadcast across the country. Police hoped someone would recognize the man who had called himself Victor. Coming up, more alarming stories about a Hollywood predator.
I saw a powdery substance in my drink. My vision was blurred, and I knew something was not right.
Police believed they were getting closer to finding Christy Johnson. A police sketch of the suspect had been broadcast all over the country. Would a call from an unlikely source finally put a name to that face? A parole officer called the Santa Monica police. She had just seen the composite sketch of the suspect.
Almost instantaneously, we get a call from a parole officer that says, "This guy is one of my parolees."
She told police the man's name was Victor Paleologos.
We did a background check on Mr. Paleologos, and we noted that he had been arrested a number of times for sexual assault.
After serving time on an assault and attempted rape charge, Victor Paleologos was released from jail on January 20th, 2003. Could this be the same Victor with the smooth pitch who would approach Susan Murphy at the Century City Mall just days later?
He was dressed nice. He spoke well. He had a tremendous knowledge of the business. He looked legitimate.
But for Susan, that face was still impossible to forget. And when police showed her a photo lineup, she identified Victor immediately. And that wasn't all. Soon after Christy's story was made public, other women came forward with what was becoming an all-too-familiar story. Actress Kathy DeBono told investigators she was also approached at the Century City Mall.
He asked me if I was a model or an actor, and if I was interested in James Bond movies and that I might make a good Bond girl, and a flag went off immediately. But of course I kept listening. You don't want to miss an opportunity.
The man introduced himself as an executive from Disney named Brian.
So I asked him for a business card, and he told me he had a business card, but it was his last one, and that I couldn't keep it, but he would show it to me. And I wrote down every detail on that card.
He made an appointment for a photo shoot, and then Kathy told police he described the outfit she should wear. By now, they knew exactly what it would be.
He wanted me to wear a white shirt, a black skirt, heels, James Bond girl affair. That's what he wanted me to bring.
Kathy was suspicious. She told police she had her agent call the number she got from the business card.
My agent called Brian at Disney's office and left him a voicemail about this. And he called her back pretty quickly and said, "Tell your client not to go to this meeting. That was not me. I did not meet her at a mall. I did not give her a business card, and someone is lying to her."
After listening to Kathy's story, police heard from yet another woman convinced that the man had been running the scam for years.
He approached me and told me, "You're a very beautiful woman. Are you a model?" And I said, "Yes, I am."
Elizabeth Buzzini told police it had been 15 years since she had been approached, but she remembered exactly what the man claiming to be a studio executive said to her.
He said, "We're going to be doing a new James Bond movie." And I had given him my agent's phone number, and I gave him my phone number, and it went from there.
After resisting for months, Elizabeth said she finally agreed to meet him at a restaurant to talk about the movie.
And we sat at the bar, and I noticed Victor walked around to the other side of the bar to order our drinks.
After just a few sips of her Bloody Mary, Elizabeth knew something was terribly wrong.
It was very scary. I thought I was going to faint, and I felt nauseous, and my vision was blurred. and I knew something was not right. I looked in my drink and I saw a powdery substance in my drink. It looked like sugar was poured on top of my drink.
She excused herself to go to the ladies' room and then called the restaurant manager on a payphone.
I said, "This man is trying to drug me. Please call the police immediately. Please watch him. Make sure he doesn't leave." I gathered myself together in the restroom and I went back to the table to try and stall him.
When she returned to the table, Elizabeth sensed the man's uneasiness.
He said, "Are you okay?" And I looked at him and I said, "Well, I'm feeling a little dizzy." And I looked down at the drink and I said, "Well, what is this white powdery substance in my drink?" And he said, "Oh, I put sugar in your drink." And I said to him, "I don't like sugar in my drink." And I said, "Here, why don't you drink it?" And I switched drinks with him. He looked at me kind of oddly and I said, "What's wrong?" I said, "You can drink the drink." I said, "I don't like sugar." And that's when he excused himself and he ran out of there to go to the restroom and he never came back.
Tests would later show that the drink had been laced with Benadryl and Dramamine. And now, even though it had been 15 years since she had been drugged, Elizabeth had no trouble identifying the man in a photo lineup. It was Victor Paleologos. Once police had a positive ID on Paleologos, they executed a search warrant at the home address he had given the parole board.
This is where Victor Paleologos lived at. This is where we served a search warrant and retrieved a lot of his personal belongings in the basement area of this building.
Police found stolen ID cards and stolen keys from a spa locker. They also confiscated Victor's personal computer. When an analysis was done of the hard drive, police discovered pornographic images of women. They were disturbing and shocking. The women were dressed in outfits identical to what Victor had asked Susan Murphy, Kathy DeBono, and Christy Johnson to wear. It didn't take police long to find Paleologos. He was already in custody in the LA County Jail for stealing a car.
Paleologos, using a stolen identity, walked in and made arrangements to buy a BMW. One of the workers at the BMW agency had brought the car down that he was going to buy, gassed it up, parked it at the entrance.
Victor simply jumped in and drove off. Police were notified, and after a dramatic chase, Victor was arrested. Now, just days later, investigators desperate to find Christy Johnson went to the county jail to pick up Victor and take him to the station for questioning. But incredibly, he couldn't be found.
So they had to lock the whole facility down, and hours went past because we're sitting there wondering, we just went to pick him up at the county and come back, and what's taking so long?
Had Victor escaped? Guards searched for hours before they finally found him cowering in a trash compartment in the kitchen. The delay outraged investigators. Christy's life might still be on the line, and they had no time to lose.
We were continuing to hope against hope that she was alive, that she was being held against her will someplace, and we just needed to identify the location so we could get there and, save her life.
Coming up, Victor Paleologos is finally confronted about Christy's disappearance.
I truly believed I was staring into the face of evil.
Want more on the case? Go to investigationdiscovery.com/PaulaZahn and view more exclusive interviews and behind-the-scenes video. While investigators built a case against their main suspect, Christy Johnson's family and friends were still clinging to the hope that she would be found alive.
I'd stare at the stars and I'd go, Christy, where are you? Where are you? And during the time that we couldn't find her, I would stare at the stars and I'd go, Christy, Christy, help us find you. This is the waiting game, you know. Every day we'd sit there and pray for an outcome.
Victor Paleologos, the prime suspect, was brought to Santa Monica Police Headquarters. When his interrogation began, he dodged every question about Christy Johnson.
I'm looking for a missing person. Have you seen this young lady?
No.
And
I know what you're looking at. I've seen reports coming on TV every day. I don't know her.
Detectives tried to trick Paleologos into a confession by using an old interrogation ploy. They fed him information that wasn't true. They told him a witness had seen him with Christy, but he continued to deny ever having met her.
Tell us where she was the last time you saw her. And did you at least tell us that?
Last time I saw her, she was on TV. That was the last time I saw her.
He's very cagey and very evasive. He reminds me of water. You pour water, and wherever it meets resistance, it goes around it.
The interrogation dragged on for 7 long hours, and police were still no closer to knowing where Christy might be.
He wasn't giving us anything, and most importantly, he wasn't telling us where Christy was. But we knew that it had been a while, and time was of the essence. We had to find her.
To keep things moving forward, police called on Susan Murphy, the actress who had reported an encounter at the Century City Mall that was eerily similar to what police believe happened to Christy. Detectives asked her to pick out Victor from a lineup, this time in person.
It's like going to a horror film, because you're seeing this person again. I immediately recognized him.
Susan had positively identified Victor again, and as Detective Obenchain escorted her out of the station, an urgent call came in on the detective's cell phone.
They found a body of a female.
From the moment she had first learned about Christy's disappearance, Susan had felt a connection with her. When she heard the detective on the phone, she dreaded what it might mean.
I remember overhearing Virginia talking on the phone.
And this is right after you'd finished
the live
lineup and had identified Victor
Yes.
for her
Mhm.
and the other detective.
Yes.
And did a chill go down your spine?
Yes.
Your heart sank.
Again.
A group of hikers had found a body in a ravine.
The boys are hiking along there, and one of them glances over the cusp and looks down there and says, that looks like a mannequin down there, about 80 or 90 feet down in the brush. And he hikes down there, and oh my God, he comes back, it's a body, it's a human body, and oh, it's awful.
You're hoping that it's not the person that you're looking for. You just hope that it's not.
Detective Henry raced to the scene and scrambled down the steep hill.
And as I got down there and got closer and closer, I could see that there was a female. It was a white female. I could see that her hands were tied behind her back with what looked like shoelaces. I could see that she was wearing a white blouse.
As he approached the body, he saw shoes with stiletto heels, just like the ones Christy had bought. And then he checked for the tattoo of a flower he knew Christy had.
When I saw the shoes, I'm like, I think this is her. And then that's when I went one step further to see if the tattoo was there. And it was. And that's when I concluded that this was, in fact, Christy Johnson.
Santa Monica Police Chief James Butts took it upon himself to notify Christy's father.
He said that Christy was no longer with us. And I told him, I said, I appreciated the fact that they found Christy. And I said, treat her with dignity. And he assured me that he would. And he did.
I suspect that the shock of what Chief Butts told you
Right.
probably never wore off.
No, I can remember almost every word. At that point, then there's nothing they could do. You know, what are you going to do? Bury your daughter. It's over. And then came, you know, who was responsible for this?
Victor Paleologos continued to deny any responsibility. But despite that, and the lack of forensic evidence linking him to the crime, prosecutors set out to prove he was the man Christie had met at the Century City Mall that fateful day in February.
We know from what transpired that she met someone at the Century City Mall, and that person told her that she would be perfect in a James Bond role. From there, the question then became, who did she meet? The biggest hurdle was proving who she met at that location.
Prosecutors would try to build a circumstantial case, relying heavily on the stories of all the other women who had come forward with accounts of frightening run-ins with Paleologos.
I was very impressed by the courage of these prior victims to come forward.
The coroner determined that Christie Johnson had been murdered, that she had been strangled to death. That cleared the way for prosecutors to charge Victor Paleologos with first-degree murder. They said they would seek the death penalty. When the trial finally started in July 2006, the prosecution had 7 women ready to testify. Some had been targets of the same scheme used on Christie. Others were victims of sexual assault.
Their stories were powerful. Each and every victim that came in, prior victim, came in and told her unique story, but it was emotional, it was raw, and the similarities among all the victims and Christie were striking.
One after another, women who had been promised fame and fortune by Victor Paleologos came forward to confront him in court. Susan Murphy was one of them.
I truly believed I was staring into the face of evil. I was sitting 6 inches away from a really evil character. That's as close to evil as I ever want to be again.
For many of them, it was the strength and dignity demonstrated by Christie's parents that gave them the courage to testify.
When I looked at Christie's parents sitting in the back of the courtroom, and her father gave me the thumbs up to keep going, it made me stronger, and I wanted to fight for her, because that could have been me. That could have been me.
The stories painted an ugly picture of Paleologos as a violent sexual predator.
That was really the linchpin on the case. I didn't think potentially that a juror, a reasonable thinking juror on such an ugly case, would be able to overcome such a strong pattern.
No one had seen Paleologos with Christie, but one witness testified that she actually saw him at the Century City Mall the same day Christie was there.
That was the bingo moment. He was there. And is that man in this courtroom? Yes, he is. Can you point him out? This man right here. It's him. He was there on that day.
The defense believed it could exploit the lack of direct evidence linking Paleologos to Christie's murder.
I think factually it was clearly a circumstantial case without any direct witnesses. But during the trial itself, a lot of evidence was presented. Not that it was overwhelming evidence, it just, I thought the trial became more based on what happened in his past versus what happened potentially in February of 2003 when she disappeared. And that really concerned me.
Perhaps sensing things were going badly, Paleologos accepted a plea deal in the middle of the trial. In exchange for a 25-year-to-life sentence, he would plead guilty to first-degree murder and waive all rights to an appeal. His attorney believed it was the best deal his client could get.
Then they say, Mr. Flyer, we'll dismiss death, we'll dismiss life without parole, 25 to life, I'm saying this is like someone opened the pearl gates for Victor, and it was his decision.
Then, in a surprising move, Paleolocus did a complete reversal. He wrote the judge an 11-page letter saying he wanted to withdraw his plea. He said he had been pressured by his attorney to accept the deal.
He basically denied that he was involved after going through the whole plea deal, after committing to the fact that he was involved, he had contact with her, no matter, with all the evidence that was presented in the case. He decided that he wanted to change his mind.
The judge didn't accept his reversal. He decided to let the plea deal stand. Victor Paleolocus was sent back to prison. Christy's father was grateful he would now be off the streets for good.
We're talking about a predator. We're talking about an evil person. And somewhere along his life, he needed to be stopped.
Hi, I'm Paula Zahn, and tonight we're on the case in Lake Worth Beach, Florida, about an hour north of Miami. Residents of this popular tourist destination were stunned after a young mother was found savagely murdered in her own home. As police studied the evidence at the crime scene, a terrifying story of Minerva Cantu's last moments alive came into focus. But it would take decades for investigators to piece together the trail of clues that led to her cold-hearted killer. November 27th, 1990. It was close to 6 p.m. when Fermin Cantu arrived home from work. He was concerned when he noticed the front door was open. But his heart stopped when he stepped inside and found the lifeless body of his 26-year-old wife, Minerva, tied up on the floor of their living room. What did Mr. Cantu walk into when he arrived home?
He walked into a nightmare. The entire inside of the residence was ransacked. He immediately saw his wife on the ground, motionless in the living room.
His wife laying on the floor, bound and gagged.
She had a towel that was wrapped around her face, covering her nose and her mouth, and that was secured with duct tape.
Fermin frantically attempted to save his wife.
He cut the duct tape and the towel that was wrapped around the lower portion of her face, trying to revive her.
But it was too late. Fermin grabbed the phone and tried to call the police.
He then realized the phone cord had been cut, so he yelled to a neighbor behind him, and she's the one who called 911.
While Fermin waited for police to arrive, he desperately tried to locate his 2 young children.
He found his 18-month-old son in the crib, crying in the back bedroom. His daughter was not located at the house.
Before the police arrived, Minerva's niece, Sonia Flores, pulled up to her aunt's house. She was worried why she had been contacted to take Minerva's 8-year-old daughter, Jacinia, home that afternoon.
Her husband was outside with the baby. I said, what happened? Nobody picked up Jacinia.
Fermin then broke the devastating news.
He says, she's gone. And I said, what do you mean she's gone? He says, she's dead. So I ran in the house, and I saw her laying on the floor.
How traumatized were you by what you saw?
It was just horrible.
Seconds later, police ushered Sonia from the house. Detective Tim Barbucio was assigned to the case. Describe to me what you saw as you walked inside the Cantu's home.
She was laying on her left side. Her wrists are bound to her ankles. Her hair has duct tape stuck to it. Blood vessels broken around her eyes. It was terrible.
For Detective Tim Barbucio, this investigation was his first homicide.
I was a 24-year-old kid with a whopping 13 months under my belt of detective experience. I was nervous and I wanted to solve it.
And the gruesome scene in the living room only added to every officer's resolve. What was determined to be her cause of death?
Asphyxiation. I believe they put the towel around her face to prevent anyone from hearing her scream.
Items from the home had been used to bind Minerva.
The phone cord that had been cut was used as a ligature. They also noticed that an electrical cord had been cut, and that also was used as a ligature.
We had a very good crime scene investigator. He collected the ligatures, he collected the tape, the towel, he processed for latent prints, did fingernail scrapings.
Minerva's orange t-shirt and shorts were also bagged and tagged. Meanwhile, analysts continued to sift through the chaotic scene for additional clues. How badly ransacked was the home?
It was pretty bad. There was stuff thrown all about the floor, and it looks like they went through every room.
Fermin Cantu provided detectives with a theory of why his home had been torn apart.
The Cantus sold gold jewelry on the weekends at the local flea market. And we were able to determine that there was cash and a lot of jewelry that was missing from the residence.
According to her husband, it was about $50,000 in jewelry, as well as $5,000 in cash that was supposed to be in her purse.
Minerva's car, a maroon Mercury Cougar, was also missing.
Her car had been stolen, so we were putting out a bolo for that as well.
While detectives searched for the car, officers began to canvass the area. And a disturbing story from a witness gave detectives their first break in the Minerva Cantu murder investigation. Six-year-old Minerva Cantu had been robbed and murdered in a brutal home invasion. Police had found little evidence at the crime scene to move the case forward. Meanwhile, those closest to Minerva were trying to come to terms with their devastating loss.
I just felt so much sadness that day.
At the tender age of 8, Jacinia had to overcome the terrible tragedy. You were very young when you lost your mom, but I know you still have vivid memories of her. What do you remember the most?
Mainly her character, the way she was. We're a very tight-knit family.
Minerva's murder was a blow to many loved ones. She had been a role model and a mentor to her niece Sonia, who was 8 months pregnant at the time of the attack.
She was like a second mom to me. She was planning my baby shower.
Minerva had been a dedicated stay-at-home mother who operated a jewelry stand at the flea market on weekends to help support her family.
Selling jewelry was her part-time job, and she loved it. She loved being around people. She was a wonderful person, always happy, smiling.
Investigators now believed it was that part-time job that had made Minerva a target of the savage attack. And as they searched for a potential suspect, the first person they questioned was her husband, Fermin. The distraught father of two told police that he had been at his landscaping job that day from 6 a.m. until he returned home at 6 p.m.
And it wasn't until he got home that he discovered her.
Could someone corroborate the fact that he was at work all day?
Yes, we confirmed through his employer that he was at work all day.
Police were confident Minerva had been dead for several hours when Fermin contacted police. And conversations with other friends helped narrow the window in which the crime had taken place. Were you able to piece together a timeline of Minerva's last known whereabouts?
Yes. She had been on the phone with a friend, and it was 2 o'clock. She said, "I'm running late to pick up my daughter from school. I have to go." And she hung up the phone.
But Minerva never arrived. At 2:30, when no one showed up to pick up Jacinia, the school called the Cantu residence. There was no answer.
I just knew something was wrong.
That must have been really scary for you.
It was, extremely.
The friend told police that she had stopped by at 3:30, assuming that Minerva and Jacinia would be home from school.
She tried to come by the house. She realized that the car was not in the driveway.
Minerva was alive and well at 2 p.m., and her stolen car was already missing before 3:30. The details convinced investigators that the attack had most likely taken place before she left her home after the 2 p.m. call. And a conversation with one of the Cantu's neighbors added weight to that theory.
We were able to locate a witness that lived just north of the Cantu residence. The witness observed two white males stop right in front of the victim's residence and stand there for a while.
So she was looking from inside her home out?
She was on her front porch. I don't know how they didn't see her, but they apparently went right down to the Cantu residence and never paid her any mind.
The neighbor watched the two men as they lingered outside the Cantu's home from 1:30 until at least 1:50 on the afternoon of the murder.
Unfortunately, it began to rain, so she quickly had to run inside the house, and that was the last time that she saw them.
Although the neighbor never saw the two men enter or leave the Cantu's home, she was able to help police create composite sketches of them. How did she describe the two men?
She described them as being in their early 20s. One was taller than the other. He had dark wavy hair and was carrying the black pouch with him.
Based on the information they had collected, police were confident the neighbor had seen Minerva's killers just minutes before the attack. And they hoped the sketches she helped create would generate the tip that brought them to justice. Police trying to solve the murder of Minerva Cantu had established a tight timeline in which the crime had taken place. They were convinced that the young mother had been killed just minutes after her final phone call at 2 p.m. And that made one of Minerva's neighbors a critical witness. She had seen two suspicious men lurking outside the Cantu residence just before that window. Now investigators hoped that composite sketches she helped create would provide the next lead on the case. What kind of response did you get to the composite sketches once you went public with them?
It generated a lot of phone calls.
Officers fanned out to track down every tip. But before they could question any potential suspects, a major clue was uncovered. Minerva's missing car was discovered just blocks away from the crime scene.
This is the area where the victim's vehicle was found the next day, right at the mouth of this alleyway.
Investigators considered several possible reasons why it had been abandoned so close to where it had been stolen.
We thought maybe it was somebody local since they only drove it such a short distance.
Why do you think the suspects abandoned the vehicle just a couple blocks from Minerva's home?
I believe they used that vehicle to escape from the crime scene and had someone pick them up. So they quickly just dumped the vehicle.
The fact that Minerva's car was abandoned so quickly was another detail that led investigators to believe the crime had been carefully planned and executed. And what analysts found after they scoured the stolen car for clues strengthened that theory. Was there any evidence left inside the car that moved the case forward?
We found nothing in the car or outside the car.
Were you able to find any witnesses who saw the men abandon the car?
No.
How frustrating was that for you?
Extremely frustrating.
But just when it seemed the investigation was back to square one, officers received a promising lead about a young man named Sean.
Sean worked in a local supermarket, and his boss had seen the composites in the newspaper.
He believed that the composite resembled Sean, so detectives immediately followed up on that.
As investigators dug deeper, it quickly became clear there was more than just Sean's appearance that caught his boss's attention. The grocery store manager was suspicious of how his employee had come into an expensive new ring.
Sean had just got engaged to his girlfriend, gave her this ring.
And there was more.
The night of the homicide, they left town. That was suspicious.
Police were already preparing to bring Sean in for questioning when another piece of the puzzle appeared to fall into place.
We received a call from a local pawn shop owner. A female came into the store trying to pawn some gold charms.
He believed the gold charms sounded like the ones he had read about in the newspaper and police flyers, detailing items stolen during Minerva's murder.
The pawn shop owner began to question the girl, and she ran out of the store.
The owner had gotten a good look at the charms the woman wanted to sell him.
The pawn shop owner could describe one of the charms as being like a moon crest. Furman Cantu said that his wife had one like that.
Was he able to give you a description of the woman who he said had come in to sell the charms?
A white female, reddish brown hair.
The general description seemed to be very similar to Sean's fiancée. Investigators had just put out an APB on the couple when they suddenly turned themselves in.
They voluntarily came in to us because he had been told that he was being looked at as a suspect.
The grocery store worker claimed he could explain everything. What was Sean's alibi for the day of the murder?
He said that they were staying at a friend's house and that friend kicked them out. So they had nowhere to stay. They decided they're going to go to Connecticut and came back 3 days later.
Police remained skeptical and pressed Sean's fiancée about her engagement ring. Were you able to get a look at her new ring?
Yes, yes. I'm the one that took the photograph of it and showed it to Mr. Cantu. When he confirmed that the ring was not his wife's ring.
Police also confirmed Sean's fiancée had not been the young woman who visited the pawn shop.
It wasn't her. We never were able to identify that person that went into that pawn shop.
In the end, the series of circumstantial clues turned out to be nothing more than an unfortunate coincidence. After passing a polygraph, Sean and his fiancée were cleared. The investigation was now back to square one, and friends and loved ones began to fear that Minerva Cantu's killers might never face justice. Police had chased dozens of tips about the two men seen lurking outside Minerva Cantu's home just minutes before her murder. But despite composite sketches and the countless hours of hard work, the case had ground to a standstill. Then, in March 1991, a confidential informant provided detectives with a promising new lead. Police got their next big break in the case from an informant. What did he tell them?
He advised police that he and a subject by the name of Randy Roberts had actually cased the Minerva Cantu residence to commit a burglary.
The informant claimed that he and Roberts had identified the Cantu's home as a high-value target for a robbery.
Randy Roberts had received information that the Cantus had a large sum of jewelry in the residence.
The advanced planning the informant described fit with the way police believed the crime had unfolded. And his tip became even more credible when police examined Randy Roberts' criminal history and background. Who was Randy Roberts, and how did he know about the Cantu's jewelry business?
Randy Roberts would basically commit home invasion, robberies, burglaries.
Still, detectives remained skeptical. They asked the informant how Roberts had developed his inside information on the Cantus. His answer was shocking.
He had a lady by the name of Esther and her husband Julio give him tips or give him information as to places that might be a potential target.
Could Randy Roberts have been responsible for the murder of Minerva Cantu? Everything police had discovered seemed to make him the prime suspect in the case. And then the informant added even more evidence. He said that Roberts had committed a very similar robbery just a few miles away.
The same confidential informant told police that Randy Roberts had also committed a home invasion robbery in Boynton Beach, nearby, with an unknown accomplice.
Many details of the two crimes were identical.
During the Boynton Beach home invasion, they tied up the lady and her husband, and then they left the residence stealing the vehicle, and they abandoned the vehicle close by.
What were the key differences between what happened and the Boynton Beach home invasion?
People who were victims of the home invasion lived to tell their story. Minerva Cantu was murdered.
Police took Roberts into custody for the home invasion in Boynton Beach after the couple he robbed identified him as their assailant during a lineup.
He admitted to the Boynton Beach home invasion.
Roberts even provided police with the name of his accomplice in the Boynton Beach crime, a man he knew as Jesse. But his tone changed when police asked him about the robbery at the Cantu's home. Did he deny being involved in Minerva's murder?
Yes, he adamantly denied being involved in the murder of Minerva Cantu.
But Roberts did have information about the crime. He claimed that he and Jesse had initially prepared to rob the Cantus together.
He and Jesse went to the residence and cased out the residence a couple times prior to the homicide.
Roberts maintained that when it was time to commit the robbery, Jesse had done it without him. And he mentioned the same married couple as the confidential informant had as the source of his information.
He was told by Esther and Julio that Jesse and a cousin from New Jersey had actually committed the crime. And he was mad because it was a crime he was going to commit.
Roberts insisted he didn't know Jesse's last name, and he had no information about the second man involved in the robbery. Were investigators thinking he could have been the second of the two men standing outside Minerva's home the afternoon of the murder?
Definitely at that point, they could not rule him out as being a suspect.
Investigators believe that the couple Roberts mentioned, Esther and her husband Julio, knew who was at the Cantus' home that day. Officer Pete Ebel was part of the team assigned to watch them.
We were given the task of doing surveillance on some suspects that had some involvement with some jewelry. They looked promising.
Police then utilized their confidential informant to try to get additional evidence.
The confidential informant would secretly record telephone conversations or in-person meetings with Esther and Julio.
During the conversations, the answer to several puzzling details of the crime became clear, including why Minerva's killers had taken her car.
She was just leaving when they walked in, and she had everything in the car. They took the car, they took the jewelry, everything. It was so easy.
The secret recordings also confirmed that Jesse had been involved.
He messed up there.
That's Jesse?
Yeah.
He threw it up.
He messed up now. Up to the power and
Then the informant asked Esther and Julio in Spanish if Randy Roberts had been Jesse's accomplice.
Yeah. No, he wasn't here. He would have got a lot of money. I know it wasn't. He said, if I would have done it, I'd lay you on the dock.
After reviewing all of the tape-recorded calls, police were convinced that Randy Roberts was not involved in the murder of Minerva Cantu.
At no time did anyone ever implicate Randy Roberts in the homicide. It was always referring to Jesse.
Following the tape-recorded conversations, Esther and her husband Julio were questioned by police. But despite all the evidence to the contrary, the couple denied knowing anything about the murder and refused to cooperate. Were investigators able to make any arrests after getting this information?
No, they were not.
Why is that?
They were working closely with the state attorney's office, and at the time, they just didn't feel that there was sufficient evidence to make an arrest. You get one chance to make the arrest.
Investigators on the case found the decision extremely frustrating.
We couldn't put all the pieces together. It was just a very difficult case with a lot of dead ends, and they all went cold eventually.
And for more than 2 decades, it stayed that way until science and relentless police work finally landed Minerva Cantu's killers back in the crosshairs of their investigation. Investigators trying to solve the murder of Minerva Cantu had come very close to identifying a suspect. But even after police obtained tape recordings that indicated a man named Jesse had killed her, the case went cold. And it stayed that way as Minerva's 2 young children grew into adults desperate for answers. Did you become increasingly frustrated and angry that her case wasn't solved?
I did. I wanted justice. It was just horrible. Horrible for someone to do something like this to her. And to leave us to have no mother to grow up.
Because so much time had passed, did you eventually lose hope that the case would be solved?
I did, yes.
Then, in 2014, Jacinia was contacted by Detective Paige McCann from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office. When you looked at the case file for the first time, did you think you had a chance to solve it?
Yes, I did. I believe that the initial investigators did a fantastic job. It was just missing that last piece of the puzzle.
And the new team of detectives hoped that the last piece might be the identification of their prime suspect's real name. Investigators spoke with confidential informants and pored over countless case files searching for that answer. Were police able to learn who Jesse was?
Yes, they believe that Jesse is Jaffer Negron.
Negron's criminal history convinced detectives they were on the right track. What did you end up learning about Jaffer Negron?
He had prior arrests for stealing vehicles. He had some drug charges, some weapon charges. He was currently living in North Carolina at the time of my investigation.
But before Detective McCann confronted Negron, she went back through every item collected at the crime scene, hoping to uncover physical evidence that would seal the case against him.
This is a picture of the towel that the suspect used to cover Minerva Cantu's head. They used several pieces of duct tape in order to secure this tightly to her head.
I was very hopeful. Duct tape is the gold mine for trace evidence.
Investigators sent the duct tape to the crime lab for testing. The results were surprising.
We were hopeful that the duct tape would yield a DNA profile identifying the suspects, but unfortunately, we only obtained Minerva Cantu's DNA.
I couldn't believe it. I was crushed. There we are, back to ground zero.
But the investigators fought through the disappointment and tested other less likely pieces of evidence.
Minerva's orange shirt, and also some scrapings from her fingernails.
What were the test results?
For the orange shirt and the fingernail scrapings, there was a mixture that involved Minerva Cantu, as well as foreign DNA profiles.
Investigators were certain that the DNA would be a match to Jaffer Negron, but they still needed to obtain a sample for testing. What was your strategy for getting his DNA?
I contacted the Harnett County Sheriff's Office in North Carolina and requested their assistance. They spent many, many man-hours following him around and finally were able to obtain a cigarette butt that he had discarded. Then we submitted it for DNA analysis.
The testing confirmed what investigators already knew.
His DNA profile was consistent with a foreign DNA profile obtained from the orange shirt as well as the fingernail scrapings.
For investigators, it was an incredibly satisfying moment.
Wow, all that emotion, all those years of frustration, that little kid laying in that crib, that young girl, that husband whose wife was brutally murdered, and all of a sudden, wow, we got him.
Investigators were now certain they had identified at least one of the two men responsible for the murder of Minerva Cantu. But they were still convinced Negron had an accomplice.
We had witnesses at the scene that said two men were seen out in front.
Investigators hope Negron would provide them the name of his partner in crime during a videotape interview in his home state of North Carolina. Detective McCann started with basic questions.
I'm going to show you a picture of the victim in this case, and just let me know if you recognize her.
I don't recall.
This is 421 North F Street. Do you ever remember being at that house?
I don't recall. I mean, this house was a lot of different houses.
Negron denied knowing Randy Roberts, Esther, and her husband Julio, and claimed he was not part of a robbery ring in Palm Beach.
Do you know why they would bring your name up?
Maybe they were trying to throw me under the bus or something like that. I never killed nobody, period. I did not kill that thing. They might have mentioned my name, but I didn't do what you think I did.
After countless denials and evasive answers, Negron was confronted with the evidence that proved he was lying.
Your DNA was found in 2 areas at the crime scene, okay? And really haven't been able to explain how they could have gotten in those areas.
I didn't have nothing to do with that.
So there wouldn't be any reason at all for your DNA to be anywhere in that house?
I have no idea, why my DNA would be in that house.
But slowly, Negron began to waver under the pressure of the evidence.
If my DNA is there, that means I was there. And all I'm telling you is I don't remember that.
What was going through your mind as you questioned him and heard his answers?
I just wanted to know why. Why did they not take off the towel from around her face? I mean, that would have been simple. To take that off, she wouldn't have suffocated. It's a tragedy.
Did you sense you were ever going to get a confession out of him?
No. I didn't think he would confess, and he never provided any additional information that would lead us to who his accomplice was.
Jeffrey Negron was charged with the murder of Minerva Cantu and extradited back to Florida to stand trial. For Minerva's family, it was news they had waited more than 25 years to hear. Can you take me back to that moment where you were informed that the man who was suspected of killing your mother had been arrested?
I literally just cried because I just never thought I would see that day.
It was shocking. I couldn't believe it. It finally happened. Somebody finally got caught for doing this horrible thing to my aunt.
It was a moment of vindication for the first detective on the case. What was your reaction when years later you found out there had finally been an arrest?
I was thrilled. I didn't think it would ever get solved.
When Jeffrey Negron's trial opened in June of 2019, prosecutors told the packed courtroom their theory of how Negron and his accomplice committed the brutal home invasion.
They weren't expecting anybody to be in the home. They were surprised. They tied up Minerva Cantu.
She was getting ready to leave to go pick up her daughter from school. Based on statements provided in his own words to Esther and Julio, he used the duct tape and as well as put the towel over her mouth so she couldn't scream any longer.
Jasenia Cantu listened to the gruesome details with her loved ones. I know it was extremely important for you and your brother to attend the trial. Can you explain to us why that was critical for you?
For my mom to know that we're still here seeking justice for her. It was extremely difficult to look at someone and know that they're the ones responsible for your mother not being here. It was heartbreaking.
After a 3-day trial, Jeffrey Negron was found guilty of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison with a possibility of parole after 25 years. For Minerva's loved ones, the verdict was a relief, but they believe there is still more to be done before they feel justice has been served.
We still don't know the whole story of why, and he didn't do this alone.
Investigators agree. Is Minerva Cantu's case still active?
Yes, there was a second accomplice, so it won't be completely closed until we can identify that second accomplice.
Law enforcement continues to look for that accomplice. Are you hopeful that their investigation might lead to another arrest?
We waited all these years, and we got him. I still have hope.
A hope that is fueled by the loving memories of a woman who meant so much to so many. Is your mom a daily presence in your life?
She is constant. And the one lesson I always learned from her was to have a good presence, be good to people. She was a good person.
Hi, I'm Paula Zahn, and tonight we're on the case in Frederick, Maryland, about an hour from Washington, D.C. The close-knit community was stunned when news broke that 15-year-old Stacy Hoffmaster had vanished off her front porch just moments after her mother had seen her there. Fear over what might have happened to the friendly high school freshman forced her family and police to consider many troubling possibilities. But the reality of what actually happened was far worse than any of them could have imagined. Wednesday, October 2nd, 1996. It was a cold, crisp afternoon in Maryland when a call came in to the Frederick Police Department. On the line was Vicki Hoffmaster. She was frantic because her 15-year-old daughter, Stacy, was missing. When was the last time she had seen her daughter?
She had not seen her daughter since the day prior. At around 1 o'clock, she had come home from work a little bit early, and Stacy was on the front porch of their house.
Was she surprised to see her daughter home that afternoon?
Yes, Stacy had left school early.
Stacy was skipping school that day, so they sort of met eyes. She pulled into the back of the house where the parking area was, and by the time she had come out to the front of the house, Stacy was gone.
That afternoon, Stacy's family believed the teenager had left to avoid a confrontation with her mother over cutting school. What went through your mind when you heard that your sister was missing?
I wasn't worried because I just figured maybe she had went off with a friend and decided to stay at their house for a night.
But Stacy's brother Chris and the rest of her loved ones began to worry when they discovered that none of Stacy's friends had heard from her. Even her boyfriend Alfie hadn't seen her since they had lunch together the afternoon she disappeared.
Alfie told us that they came here and picked up their lunch. Stacy got chicken nuggets, french fries, and a soda. After they got their food, they walked back to Stacy's house. She lives about a mile down that direction. They actually ate their lunch on Stacy's porch.
Stacy's mother had come home just minutes after that lunch was over. Alfie claimed he had already gone back to work and had made plans to see Stacy later that afternoon.
He told Stacy they would see each other when he got off work at around 3 o'clock, and she agreed to meet him.
Did she ever show up at 3 p.m.?
No, ma'am, she didn't show up.
Investigators searched Stacy's home and front yard for anything that might explain her disappearance. Could investigators find any evidence of foul play?
No. What was on the stoop was the McDonald's wrappers from what she'd eaten. That was it.
With no evidence of an abduction, police weren't sure a crime had even been committed.
It made sense that she walked away. Her mother was clearly mad.
There were no indications of any wrongdoing at the time.
But a closer examination revealed evidence that made the theory that Stacy had left on her own harder to accept.
If she had run away voluntarily, she would have taken some clothes. She would have taken her book bag. She would have taken her wallet. You know, everything of hers was there.
The mysterious missing persons investigation quickly became big news in Frederick, and police received dozens of tips from people who believed they had actually seen Stacy alive and well. Did any of the sightings eventually help investigators find her?
No, none of them.
Police continued to run down every lead. But as the weeks turned into months, many feared that the search for Stacy Hoffmaster would end badly. During those dark days, her family turned to their faith. What do you remember about those months where you and your family were waiting for answers?
It was a lot of worrying and wondering where she could be, when she's going to come home.
Then, 3 months after Stacy went missing, 2 men walking in the nearby woods made a shocking discovery.
2 local men were in this area looking for aluminum cans. They came across a blue blanket lying on the ground. It was weighed down by several stones. It caught their attention. They went over, they lifted the blanket up, and they discovered the remains of human female.
It was clear the young woman had been the victim of a savage, sexually motivated attack.
She was bound at the hands and at the feet, and they found a ligature around her throat, and she also had a sock that was protruding from her mouth.
The victim was naked and unrecognizable, her clothing scattered nearby.
They found blue sweatpants and a blue sweatshirt that had a fire department logo on them. A pair of Fila sneakers. Her underwear were recovered in the general area, and they later recovered her bra that was just a slight distance away.
The clothing and the rope the young woman had been bound with were collected as evidence. What type of rope was the victim tied with?
It was a yellow nylon rope that you would use for camping or boating.
At the end of the ropes, there was these nails. The type of nails that they used to nail in railroad ties.
They also could have been used as stakes to secure a tent. Police paid careful attention to the quilted blanket that was used to conceal the young woman's body. What kind of blanket was used to cover the victim?
It was a blue mover-style blanket, kind of heavy.
The blanket had a distinct tear mark running down one side. Was there anything at the scene that helped the investigators identify the victim?
No, they searched the area. There was nothing on scene that they could use immediately to identify her.
But prosecutor Nancy Ham, who had just begun her career at the district attorney's office, believed she knew who had been found. The sweatpants and sweatshirt found at the crime scene were a match to the one Stacy had been wearing the afternoon she disappeared. What went through your mind when you heard that a body of a young girl had been found in the woods?
I remember thinking, it's got to be Stacy Hoffmaster.
Police in Frederick, Maryland had just been called to a grim crime scene. The body of a young woman was found under a moving blanket with her hands and feet bound together with a yellow rope. It appeared she had been strangled to death during a sexually motivated attack. What kind of a human being was capable of killing a young girl that way?
I couldn't even describe it. Someone that's very evil.
Investigators believe they knew the identity of the victim. Blue sweatpants and a blue sweatshirt discovered near the body matched what 15-year-old Stacy Hoffmaster had been wearing the day she disappeared. And the results of the medical examiner's report confirmed everyone's worst fears.
Stacy had a bone abnormality in her foot, so they had x-rays. They were able to compare the x-rays to x-rays that the MEA had taken and were able to confirm her identity that way.
The autopsy ultimately painted a terrifying picture of the teenager's last moments alive. The murder weapon had been a thin piece of rope found around Stacy's neck. What did the medical examiner determine had happened to her?
They ruled that the cause of death was asphyxiation by strangulation, ligature.
The rope that was used to strangle her was tied almost like a noose. It was so tight. The medical examiner said he had to actually cut it off, and it was this big, this big. It was tiny, like he pulled it that tight. It just made me sick.
Other injuries Stacy suffered help investigators sharpen their theory of how the sadistic attack unfolded. Could the medical examiner find any signs of a struggle?
She had a pretty bad contusion to her forehead, and the medical examiner said it would have made her woozy, and it would have made it very difficult for her to fight.
Biological evidence confirmed that Stacy had been sexually assaulted. Was there any doubt in your mind that whoever had left the biological evidence behind had not only raped Stacy, but killed her?
No, ma'am.
Undigested food in Stacy's stomach provided critical information about when the attack happened.
They found a starchy material that was consistent with French fries, and we knew she had had French fries as part of her meal from McDonald's.
Did that help investigators narrow down the time frame of her murder?
Yes, it did. It usually takes between an hour to up to 3 hours to digest food, and we knew that she had eaten lunch at around 12 to 12:30.
Based on the evidence, it appeared that Stacy was killed the day she disappeared. In fact, police were confident Stacy's murder had happened between 1 p.m. and 3 that afternoon. While the details were important to the investigation, they wouldn't help detectives with the grim task that came next: informing Stacy's family that their search had ended in the worst way possible. broke the news to you that Stacy's body had been found?
It was my brother. He just looked over at me and told me, Stacy's dead, and I immediately just ran and cried. I was just so upset.
You were just 14 years old at the time. How did you cope with your sister's murder?
Just trying to be there for my family, and my mother especially.
In his quiet moments alone, Chris was tormented by his final conversation with his sister. It had taken place at the bus stop on the morning of her murder. As he replayed that conversation over and over again, he wondered if there was something more he could have done to convince Stacy not to skip school that day. But in the end, his biggest regret was simply not telling her how much she meant to him.
I wish I would have given her a hug and told her I love her.
Chris will always treasure his memories of his beloved older sister. How would you describe Stacy's personality?
She was very big-hearted, very kind, very outgoing. She would help anybody that needed help.
As investigators listened to her family describe Stacy, they were forced to consider if someone had taken advantage of the teenager's compassionate nature to lead her into harm's way. Investigators retraced the teenager's last known whereabouts, in particular, her last lunch date with her boyfriend Alfie. Police believe there was more to Alfie's story than he had told them. They brought him in for questioning and focused on every minute of his timeline during the 3-hour window in which Stacy was killed. Especially what happened after the couple finished eating lunch on Stacy's porch.
The last conversation they had was that she would meet him at his place of employment when he got off work at 3 o'clock.
Alfie told police he was worried when Stacy didn't arrive.
He waited for Stacy at 3 o'clock at the corner where she was supposed to meet him, and 10 minutes went by and he thought, where is she?
Alfie walked to Stacy's house and spoke with her brother Chris, who had just gotten home from school. How did he seem to you? Did he seem worried?
At first he seemed just, hey, well, where's your sister at? And I said, she's not here. He looked like he was getting a little worried, so he asked me to borrow my bike. He was probably gone maybe 10 minutes, came back and said, I didn't find her. If she comes home, tell her I'm at work. Please to come see me. And I said, okay.
Alfie claimed that his search for Stacy made him late for his second job, which started at 3:30 p.m.
He ended up getting to work about 3:50.
Investigators felt the biggest problem with Alfie's story was that there was no way to confirm that Stacy had not actually gone to meet him that afternoon.
He admitted that she was to come see him.
Could Alfie's actions have been designed to cover up a deadly crime? Police investigating the murder of Stacy Hoffmaster were under intense pressure. The teenager had been found in a wooded area not far from her home. What was the reaction of the community to Stacy's murder?
The community was appalled. They wanted answers, and they wanted them quick. People were alarmed.
Everybody was upset. They always just wondered, are they ever going to find him? How do you just do something like that and get away with it?
Stacy had been killed within hours of when she and her boyfriend Alfie had their last lunch together. And now, all of Alfie's actions during the time she was missing were being viewed in a different light. Investigators wondered if there was a reason he had spent weeks trying to convince them that Stacy was still alive.
he kept reporting sightings to the police, and they were having a very hard time confirming these sightings. He was putting up signs everywhere, and they didn't know if he was sort of sending them on wild goose chases. It created suspicion.
But perhaps the most troubling concerns were raised by those closest to Stacy. Did you ever suspect that Alfie could have had something to do with Stacy's murder?
Absolutely. Yeah, I did. I had thoughts that it could have been him.
Friends painted a portrait of a jealous boyfriend who constantly questioned Stacy about other men. What did Stacy's friends have to say about her relationship with Alfie?
The reports were coming in from Stacy's friends that she and Alfie were going through a hard time. They were arguing a lot.
Did investigators think an argument could have resulted in murder?
Yes, ma'am. The fact that he admitted that she was to come see him when he got off of work, the reports that they had been having some problems at the time, all of those things combined just raised a possible motive with investigators.
Still, in the face of intense questioning, Alfie repeatedly denied any involvement in the crime and stuck to his story about what he had done that day. Investigators asked him to take a polygraph. What were the results?
There were signs of deception in his polygraph.
Was he the prime suspect in her murder?
Absolutely.
When police turned up the pressure even further, Alfie stopped cooperating.
They then got a search warrant and took his DNA. After his DNA was taken, he lawyered up.
Detectives knew Alfie had an intimate relationship with Stacy, which meant a DNA match with the evidence might not seal their case. So they continued to work hard to find a crack in his timeline. What were the unanswered questions?
From the time he left work at 3 o'clock till the time he punched in at his second place of employment, there were a lot of gaps in his time that needed to be accounted for.
Alfie eventually arrived at his second job at 3:50. That left a 50-minute window of time unaccounted for. Was it enough to have committed the heinous crime? Police carefully retraced every element of Alfie's alibi, verifying each step he claimed to have taken, and reached a stunning conclusion.
With the routes that he provided us, that left him less than 4 minutes that he could have had the opportunity to get to the woods, commit the crime, and still make it back to his place of employment.
And any doubts that Alfie could have been responsible for Stacy's murder were removed when the crime lab returned its report. Did Alfie's DNA match the biological evidence recovered from the crime scene?
No, it didn't.
Could you rule him out as a potential suspect?
Yes, we could rule him out.
With Alfie cleared, the investigation was back to square one. Detectives returned to the crime scene, and it was a second, more comprehensive search of the area where Stacy's body had been found that revealed critical new evidence.
They realized that there was a campsite less than a half a football field from there.
Investigators noticed an abandoned tent held together with some very unusual materials.
The same type of ropes and nails hanging that matched what Stacy was tied